So hello and welcome to the video. Late last year I made a video talking about my strategy for renewing my gold status in 2023. It's time to give you an update on those thoughts. Now, if I didn't have a YouTube channel where I talked about tier points and gold status and the like, I probably wouldn't go for gold this year. Things still have not quite recovered after the you-know-what. Pricing is still a bit weird, schedules are still a bit weird, and I think I would be happy to allow myself to soft land to silver for a year and then look to get back up to gold next year when hopefully things are a little bit more back to normal. But as I do have a channel that talks about tier point runs and gold status and the like, I've decided I am going to get myself back up to gold when my current status expires in the middle of August this summer. So I've been looking pretty hard for ways that I'm going to achieve this, and to be honest, there's no real slam dunk option out there. I found a number of different ways I could get there, all of which have got their individual pros and cons. So in this video, I'm going to talk about 6 ways that you can set out to get enough tier points to get or renew your status with British Airways. And in the process of researching this video, I think I've worked out what I'm going to do, which I will reveal at the end of this video. So if that sounds good, stick around.
Hi, I'm Matt. I've lived in 5 countries on 4 continents. I've flown over 1.4 million miles. I've visited over 100 countries, every American state, but I'm nowhere near done. So subscribe and you might pick up some hacks, hints and tips to make your next trip better.
So before we get stuck in, and in case there are some viewers who are a bit newer to all of this stuff, there's a few points that I just want to very quickly go over to refresh your memories. Getting silver with British Airways requires 600 tier points and getting gold requires 1500 tier points. The days of reduced thresholds are now over. And in both cases you need to do 4 flights that are operated or marketed by British Airways, or 4 flights that are operated or marketed by Iberia, or a combination of the two. That is important to remember, and it is also interesting to note that you can get status on British Airways without actually ever flying on British Airways, provided you get these 4 qualifying flights via a BA code share or an Iberian flight. So for example, if you flew from London to Bangkok via Doha on Qatar Airways planes but under a British Airways flight number, you would then get your 4 qualifying legs and be well on your way to status. The second point is that tier points can only be earned by flying. You can't buy them, you can't win them, you have to fly yourself to get them. If you buy a flight for somebody else, they will get the tier points. Thirdly, it is possible to get status by flying in economy, but it will take a long time and it will be really, really painful. So almost always when we talk about status, we are talking about travel in premium cabins. And finally, the question I am asked most frequently is, what on earth is the grace period? So the way the BA scheme works is that your year will end on the 8th of a month. The months differ, but it is always the 8th. The grace period is then the rest of that month plus the following month. So it's about 52 days. And during that grace period, your previous status will prevail. You'll still get all of the benefits of that old expired status, but the tier points you earn will go towards your new qualifying year. So to illustrate, if you got your 600th tier point, which qualifies you for silver, on the 7th of your renewal month, you'll get status for the rest of that year, which is 1 day, the following year, plus the grace period on the end. If you get your 600th tier point on the first day of your qualifying period, which would be the 9th of the month, impossible to do that, but let's just assume, you would have the status for the balance of that year, which is 364 days, the following year, and the grace period. So 2 days difference in getting your 600th tier point makes a year's difference in status. So the ideal thing to do is to achieve your tier point goals within your grace period, because that will maximize the length of time that the status you earn will prevail for. Hopefully you get the idea. So point number 1 is get a job that involves a lot of travel. Now, this is a bit of a silly point, and trust me, the rest of them do get better. But over the medium term, this may be something to think about. The very best type of tier point is one that you don't have to pay for. So if there's a way that you can change your job or change your role to get more travel, which will earn you tier points through the course of your work, that will clearly help you achieve your status goals. Point 2, a little bit more practical for most people, is to optimise any travel that you may already be having to do. So London Heathrow to Las Vegas is 140 tier points each way. If you have some control over your booking and you're able to fly from London to New York to Los Angeles to Las Vegas, that stretches the tier points you'll earn each way to 320. And if you were to start in Manchester, that would add another 80 points to a round trip, which would get you almost halfway to gold. Now, adding all those extra legs adds time, hassle, the risk of misconnection, and can be really difficult to sell to her or him indoors. But it is a good way of ramping up the tier points you do earn from travel you're already looking to take. And as we'll see in the next point, travelling indirectly can actually be cheaper than flying directly. So point 3 is to do an actual tier point run. This is a trip that is designed primarily or largely with the objective of gathering tier points. I've made a few videos about this over the years, so I won't go into too much detail here. You should be able to get 720 tier points out of a trip that starts in near Europe, possibly more, and you should be able to get a minimum of 800 tier points out of a trip that starts in a short haul plus destination such as Sofia. Again, pricing isn't brilliant, so you're going to be paying about £1.50, perhaps a little bit more for each tier point. But before BA extended everybody's status because of the you-know-what, I was looking very closely at how I would renew back in 2019, and I've been able to dig out that old spreadsheet to get some real-life numbers from back then. And back in 2019, I found a routing from Bucharest to Las Vegas which delivered 880 tier points via Helsinki that was costing £1,220. That's £1.40 a tier point, but I think those days may be over for a little while yet. And if you are thinking about a tier point run, the very best pricing is usually around a 6-month advanced purchase fare. So I had a look and I found Tenerife to the west coast of the US for £1,450 with a 6-month advanced purchase. I didn't optimise that, I didn't look too closely at it, but there are some decent fares out there if you look for them, and in my tier point run video I do talk about how you set about finding opportunities. So if you take a tier point run that delivers, say, 800 tier points, that's more than enough for silver and you're halfway to gold. And if you're not accumulating tier points through work or through other travel, that will mean you probably need to do 2 of these. On to point 4, and that is a BA holiday promotion that is running until the end of 2023. And through this promotion, if you book a holiday, which is flights plus a car or a hotel for a minimum of 5 nights, the tier points associated with the flights will be doubled. But the crucial thing that everybody forgets is that a BA holiday that qualifies has to start in the UK. You can't book that Tenerife trip I just mentioned at a hotel and double the tier points. You have to start from the UK. I've looked really hard at this because you think it ought to be a slam dunk to just find yourself a cheeky holiday, be out and back in 5 or 6 days and be gold. The problem though is that BA's pricing on flights out of the UK is high. It's really, really high. And it is much higher than flights that start outside of the UK. You're on the same plane across the Atlantic, but starting outside the UK dramatically reduces the cost. The principle behind the ex-EU trips I talk about in this video. And I found that a flight out of London to the west coast of the US when optimised is more than twice as much as starting somewhere such as Budapest. And then you add even more cost because you need to add that car or the hotel to the booking. Which means you're getting an inferior pound per tier point rate versus doing one of those trips from, say, Budapest or Dublin. You'll get your status quicker because you'll be able to do it in one trip, and there is an attraction to being able to get gold in just 6 days, but the costs are turning out to be higher. Now, while I've been looking, there have been 2 BA promotions which have brought that price down, specifically for one slightly odd routing. Jersey is considered to be in the UK for the purposes of this promotion, and flights from there to Portland were showing up for under £1,800. I was looking at this really hard, and I did manage to price up this routing, which delivers 360 tier points each way for £1,774. Those tier points double to 1,440, which alongside a flight to Jersey to position for this would have got me to gold. That sounds great, but you don't get the double tier points unless you add a car or a hotel, and that was adding about £500 to that fare. Now, I didn't really want to spend 5 days in Portland. It's nice enough, but not perhaps for 5 days. So I was looking to try and be really clever and add intermediate nights on my routing to get me to the 5 overall nights that I needed for the trip to qualify, but to minimise the amount of time I was spending in Portland. But as I was dithering over how to do this, BA pulled that promotional fare and the new fare was about 500 quid more expensive again. But it is an option well worth considering. BA does still have promotions on certain routes. The 6-month advance purchase thing isn't such a big deal. And I was looking to travel in September, which is still reasonably peak season, so hotels and cars could very well be a lot cheaper if you're looking to renew in a less busy month. And if you're already looking at taking a holiday to an optimisable destination, it may be minimal extra cost to do it via a BA holiday, and you'll get the bonus tier points. Now on to point 5, and a slightly more complex topic, which is nesting. And that takes advantage of a loophole that people have found in the BA Holidays promotion, which is that you don't actually have to stay in the hotel or pick up the car that you've booked in order to get the double tier points. Now, I have to be a little bit serious here. I've seen plenty of reports of people getting the double tier points without picking up the car. Indeed, several members of my WhatsApp group, which is available exclusively to patrons, have done it without issue. Check out the link in the description below for how to get access to this exclusive and quite good fun WhatsApp group as part of a patronage of the channel. Anywho, it is a little bit mischievous to take advantage of this loophole, so I wouldn't take anything that follows as me being an endorsement of this approach, even if lots of people are doing it without consequence. The car hire company still gets its money, BA still gets its commission, so no one is really losing out financially, even if there are lots of people in car hire shops in Sofia who are scratching their heads as to why they're suddenly seeing so many no-shows. So you book a trip from London to a short haul plus destination. The one people most commonly talk about is Sofia because it's usually the cheapest. It's 80 tier points each way. If you turn it into a holiday, that doubles to 320. You then book a separate ticket from Sofia back to London and from London back to Sofia that nests against the first ticket you bought. And if you do it right, you can fly straight back to London, and I mean straight back. Sofia is a destination which lends itself to doing a back-to-back, which means you can get off the plane and immediately get back on it again and go home. Check out this video for a little bit more detail on back-to-backs and some other more advanced tier point run concepts. You need to have checked in for that second flight back to London before leaving London, but you'll arrive in Sofia with boarding pass in hand, which will let you get back on the plane, much to the crew's amusement. Now, you're not going to earn double tier points on that second ticket back to London because a holiday needs to start from within the UK. But you will add another 160 tier points, making 480 tier points in total. You'll be doing 2 back-to-back returns to Sofia, but it doesn't involve any nights away, which can be a really handy way of gathering tier points if you live quite close to Heathrow, so you can go home at night. Now, when it comes to how much all of this costs, it really does depend on which time of year you go. I had a little bit of a look at London to Sofia in November, and you could get a return for under £250. You have to add something to that for the cost of turning it into a holiday. A car hire is reportedly very inexpensive, and then it's perhaps £270 or £280 for that nested ticket back to London. Now, 480 tier points is a lot of the way towards silver, but it's about a third of the way towards gold. So you could just do this 3 times. Now, I think it would get a bit repetitive to do it, and you would really have to keep an eye on which ticket you were flying on and which boarding pass you were using, particularly if you enjoy a few shandies as part of the experience. But it is one of the most cost and time effective ways of getting status, and if it's not complicated enough already, you could also start from Manchester or Edinburgh or even Jersey, which adds a 40 tier point leg to each of those flights, which adds 240 tier points to each of the round cycles that you do. Trust me on the maths here, because it is really quite complicated to explain. I'll make the point again that this all relies on you being a little bit mischievous in not picking up the car that you've booked, or indeed not picking up the 3 cars that you've booked, but I'll say again that lots of people are doing it without consequence. If you're prepared to take that perhaps small risk, this is a very interesting option you might want to look at. And of course, you don't have to always do it to Sofia. You could mix it up with other short haul plus destinations to keep it a bit more varied, although those other destinations do tend to be a little bit more expensive than Sofia. Right, to point 6, and a very specific flight that for many years was the cheapest way of getting tier points anywhere in the world. These days the pricing isn't quite as sharp, but it's still quite an attractive option. And that is to fly from Abu Dhabi to Jakarta in Indonesia via Colombo on Sri Lankan. Each leg is a whisker over 2,000 miles long, so that round trip delivers you 560 tier points and can be widely had for £826. That's less than £1.50 per tier point. My notes from my 2019 renewal reveal that that flight was priced at £508 a few years back, so we're not seeing quite the low rates that we used to, but perhaps we will again one day. And by all means check for yourselves, but Abu Dhabi is the sweet spot. Dubai, Jeddah, Riyadh, other parts of the Middle East are much more expensive on Sri Lankan. Another small caveat I'll put out there is that the flight timings are pretty awful. It's a narrow-bodied flight overnight from Abu Dhabi across to Colombo, and then it's either another narrow-bodied across to Jakarta, or a couple of days a week there is a wide-body A330. So do pay attention to specifically what equipment you are booking, and be prepared for it to be a bit of a tough experience on the body because of that short overnight flight in a less well-equipped plane. So that's 560 tier points, and some people will do that 2 or 3 times to get gold. And if people are pursuing gold guest list status, which requires 5,000 tier points, some people have done it multiple times as a way of trousering a large block of tier points to achieve that goal. Now, doing a few of these does get a little bit repetitive, so back in 2019 I did make note of a couple of other options from extending the trip beyond Colombo that were very good value. Again, the prices haven't returned to these levels, but if you're aware of them and keep an eye on them, they may well do again in the future. The first was on Cathay Pacific via Hong Kong to northern Japan, and it had to be northern Japan to get the second leg over the 2,000 miles. That again delivered 560 tier points, and back in 2019 it was pricing up at about 950 quid. Not the very best tier point price you're ever going to get, but pretty decent, and quite an interesting couple of flights on Cathay. And I was looking at Sapporo in northern Japan, which would be a fascinating place to visit. Another interesting fare was on Malaysian from Taipei via Kuala Lumpur to Mumbai. Again, 2,000 mile routes which delivered you 560 tier points, and back in 2019 you could have that for £750. You can now see it under £1,000, but again the pricing from 2019 is yet to return. You obviously then need to get to Taipei from Jakarta, but Cathay Pacific again was an option, and you could fly via Hong Kong, get 360 tier points, which back then was costing £625. So there's a few options, and the blended average cost of all of those, including that flight across on Sri Lankan, actually ended up being very, very competitive and would have made for quite an interesting trip. I think the second most asked question I get is how to do a tier point run to Asia, similar to how you can do them to the west coast of the United States. And my answer usually is that getting to Asia is very difficult because airlines usually only have a one-stop possibility, which limits the number of tier points that you can get. But back in 2019, there were a couple of options within Asia where you could rack up the tier points fairly cost effectively and have a bit of fun at the same time. So that's 6 things to think about if you're looking at achieving or retaining status in 2023. There are plenty of others. There are occasionally domestic fares within the United States which have fare rules that allow you to add lots of intermediate stops. Each of those are usually only 40 tier points each, but you can put 3 or 4 of them each way, which produces 200 or 300 tier points and often costs perhaps less than $500. So again, isn't brilliant, but it is a way of getting an extra little slug of tier points if you're short of the target that you're looking to achieve. But at the start, I promised to explain what my strategy at the moment is currently. And I looked very hard at each one of these options, and none of them really screamed to me to be the perfect solution. I also have an eye on making videos that are interesting for the channel, so repeating things isn't going to be that much fun for you to watch repeated videos of the same flight. So I think what I'm going to do is actually a blend of 3 of the things I've talked about. My thinking at the moment is to take a BA holiday somewhere like Sofia, where I'll get the double tier points, which will give me perhaps 360 and get me part of the way towards Abu Dhabi. I then need to bridge across to Abu Dhabi. I would probably do that as a redemption on Qatar, using their short haul aircraft in business class to make some interesting videos for the channel. It wouldn't earn me any tier points, it might actually cost some money, but you can get between those cities these days on Wizz Air, which is very inexpensive, even if it might not be the most comfortable way to do it. Then when I'm in Abu Dhabi, I'll do the flight across to Jakarta. I've never been to Jakarta, and even though the flight's probably quite an unpleasant one, I'd like to do it, I'd like to experience it, I'd like to cover it for you guys, and the chance to spend a couple of days in Jakarta is quite attractive to me because, as I say, I've never been. Then rewind back to Abu Dhabi, back up to Europe, probably Budapest, and then I think I will do a traditional tier point run. 720-ish tier points to the west coast of the United States. The pricing is okay, and it will give me the opportunity to cover the booking and the flying of a traditional ex-EU tier point run, which is something I've sort of threatened to do on the channel for some time, and it would be good to actually do that. You add up all of those tier points, you get about 1,600. I'll overshoot slightly, but I think that would be a very fun way to spend 10 or 12 days, give me lots and lots of content for the channel, and it will be quite an interesting experience to dovetail together 3 of the different ways of getting large blocks of tier points to achieve your status goals. So if you'd like to see me do all of that, you better make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it and if you got something from it. And leave me a comment. Is this all madness in your mind, or are you actually looking at some status goals yourself? So thanks for watching. Check out my Patreon account if you want to get involved in that WhatsApp group I mentioned. And I look forward to seeing you all in the next one. Goodbye.